The Story of the Root Children by Sybil von Olfers.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond.
Before, and you'll know. Now I'm on mute. Oh.
Good morning. Good morning. I have some announcements for this morning. There will be a new member orientation next Sunday during coffee hour. And today our coffee hour will be meeting outside for those who choose to go outside. Wednesday night we have a board meeting, which will start at approximately 7 o'clock. And for those of you who might be interested in
now join me in the affirmation of faith, also printed in front of you. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together to peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now is the time in the service when we take a moment to greet our neighbors. Good morning, everyone. Now is the time for sharing our joys and sorrows. We are a congregation that believes that a joy shared is increased and a sorrow shared is diminished. Would somebody like to take the mic? I will. You can summarize with the mic. I'm not as comfortable doing that as if. You want me to do that? Sure, if you'd like to.
The Story of the Root Children by Sybil von Olfers. Under the ground, deep in the earth, among the roots of the trees, the little root children were fast asleep all winter long. They didn't feel the biting wind, the cold snow, or the stinging hailstorms. They slept peacefully in their warm burrows. They were dreaming wonderful dreams of the sunshine in which they had played all through the summer. When at last winter came to an end and the sun began to melt the snow, Mother Earth came along with her candle to wake them up. "Wake up, children," she called kindly. "Time to get up now. You've slept long enough. Spring is coming and there's work to be done. I've brought your scissors, needles and thread and pieces of cloth so that you can all make new clothes. Wake up. As soon as you're ready, I'll unlock and open the doors up to the ground." The children yawned and stretched. They jumped up merrily. "Hooray! Spring is coming!" Mother Earth had pieces of lovely coloured cloth in her basket. Each of the root children chose her own colour to make a dress. The snowdrop chose a snow-white cloth, the forget-me-not a sky-blue piece, the buttercup a bright yellow, the daisy white with yellow and a bit of red, and the poppy a bright red. They sat down in a cosy circle and began to work busily. They cut, sewed, and pressed until everything fitted perfectly. And as they worked, they sang all the spring songs that they knew. As soon as they had finished making their new dresses, they went up to Mother Earth in a long procession. Mother Earth looked over her glasses in surprise when she saw the root children coming so soon. "Well, well, you have been quick," she exclaimed. "And how nice it all looks." Even the little ants who had been helping Mother Earth to wind up her wool came to look inquisitively. They had never seen such splendid clothes. But there was still more to be done. The ladybirds, the beetles, the grubs, and the bumblebees had also been sleeping under the ground and had now woken up. They had to be washed and brushed, painted colourfully, and made to shine so that they would look as beautiful as possible. What a hustle and bustle was going on down there! Up above ground, the warm sun was already bringing out the new green leaves on the trees. Would the root children be ready in time? At last it was springtime. Mother Earth opened the door and out into the warm sunshine came a procession of beetles, ladybirds and root children. In the wood, the butterflies fluttered happily around the flowers. The lilies of the valley found a cool spot in the shade of the trees beside the blue violet and let their flower bells tinkle. Old Father Slibberslack came slowly creeping along. "Aha! There you all are. Welcome to the big forest," he said to the children. The little violet looked at him shyly from her safe place behind her tree. She had never seen a creature like him before. Summer came. In the little brook that flowed between the meadows, the water lily floated on the water like a princess. The reeds whispered in the wind. The forget-me-nots came and stepped carefully into the water. But the water beetles grumbled, "It's getting too crowded here. Go and play somewhere else." In the flower meadows, the root children were having lots of fun. They danced lightly in the warm sunshine. Hop and skip, woo! If only it could always be summer. The butterflies fluttered above them, and even the beetle had a little dance. The crickets chirped, and the bees buzzed, making wonderful music together. "Careful, little grass, don't fall over." But of course, summer came to an end. The sharp autumn wind whirled the brightly coloured leaves through the air and tugged at the root children's clothes. "Ooh," called the wind. "Hurry home. It's getting cold. It's time for bed." So they all went back underground in a long procession. Mother Earth was standing by the door and hugged each child one by one. "Come in, children," she said, "and you too, beetles and bees. It's warm and cozy in here, and I've got something for you to eat and drink. After that, it's time for sleep, until I wake you up again in the springtime." And all the little root children went down underground. Take 2. And all the little root children went down under the ground to start their long winter sleep.
Through my online store alone, we've sold over $500,000 worth of spices. That's so crazy.
I went from selling to my town to selling nationwide in 1 week. It's a whole new business now.
I built a multi-million-dollar company just on the top.
And they were making their own garments out of pieces of cloth, and it matched the kind of flower that they were. And they all went up above the ground after the sun and spring started coming, and all the bugs went with them. They made all the bugs look pretty, so the bugs would look nice for presentation. And they spent the summer above the ground, and then when it became cool, they all had to go back under the ground again. As I understand it, that is an old German story. So I think some of the things, like Old Father's Snickers snack, whatever, it might be a cultural thing we don't have any reference for, because there wasn't an image of him in the book. But I loved the images, and I didn't have a copy of the book, and I couldn't get one in time. So, good morning. Again. Many of you have heard me say that I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist-like home. No one in my family was handed a religion and expected to accept it blindly, and no book was off limits. Without actually being UUs, my family had a keen understanding that spirituality is intensely personal, and that is as it should be. It must be meaningful to you, or you will only remain superficially interested at best. My mother was a single mother working as many hours as she could to provide for me, so I was raised by her parents. The story of my spiritual questing begins circa 1971 when I was 8 years old. I was first exposed to classical mythology in the public elementary school. Fascinated, I supplemented that study with books from home and from the library. I would take a book or two and hop up into the gently cradling branches of my favorite backyard tree, and I would read to it from the books that I was studying. I can't imagine I told that tree anything it didn't already know. What a sight I must have been to the neighbors reading to a tree. I didn't care. I must have been mentally and emotionally struggling with the various medical complications of my diabetic grandfather, who was seeing a multitude of specialists. Looking back, I distinctly remember thinking that each of the mythological gods was a specialist of sorts. Venus, the goddess of love, associate could, in my mind, be thought of as a cardiologist, while Mercury, the god of travel, one method of which is walking, could be thought of as a podiatrist. One could call on the deity that specialized in the area of their life that needed support. This is how my young mind categorized the various deities. So there I was, a budding young polytheist, and no matter how many times others tried to convince me that there was only one real God, that's why we call all the other ones myths, I remained hesitant to abandon my original God thoughts. Moving just a little further along in my education,
I read the Welsh stories of King Arthur and Merlin and of magic. Wait. We interrupt this program to go off on a very brief tangent. Generations ago, my maternal grandfather's family came to the United States from Wales, and only in the last couple of years did I discover that the family has old roots in the Welsh town of Carmarthen, the name of which is said to mean, among other things, Merlin's Fort. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program. Where was I? Oh, right. I read the stories of King Arthur, of Merlin, and of magic. This, too, piqued my interest. Felt strangely familiar. I knew that my grandmother did things that other grandmothers didn't do, such as got messages from the departed, burned the appropriate color candle when someone called her with a difficult issue, or made a poultice by mixing mashed potatoes with herbs and oils to put on an injury. But that wasn't magic. That was a family tradition, or as my grandma called it, the work. That was how I grew up. But as I became a teenager, I was still searching for answers. For a long time, there was nothing new. No matter what sacred texts I read, I found nothing that moved me as much as mythology and magic. Well, little did I know then that it's all mythology and magic, although at that time, I wouldn't have had the words to clearly articulate that. Today, I use the phrase religious narrative, lest anyone feel as though I am dismissing their beliefs through the words myth and magic. Not having a name for my beliefs and practices, nor a community to support me, I referred to this as my lost in a spiritual wasteland period. Fast forward to 1989, I'm 26 years old, perusing the religion section of the Lake Station Public Library, when I stumbled upon a very well-worn looking book. It was Margot Adler's sociological examination, Drawing Down the Moon, Witches, Druids, Goddess Worshippers, and Other Pagans in America. It's a very large tome. I had very little idea what some of those words meant, and I thought I knew what the other words meant, but it was about religion, so I shrugged, took it off the shelf for a look. And I didn't have to look very far. Right there on page 9 was my aha moment. Adler interviewed a Colorado family who lived on a farm and did things, some of which were nearly identical to the kind of things I grew up with. What my grandmother called the work, this family called the craft. And they identified themselves as witches, although my family did not. And there were plenty more of them around the country. I checked out the book, took it home, and read it with great enthusiasm. As I read on, there were polytheists, actual, living, present-day polytheists, not some long-dead culture dismissed as followers of false gods. Imagine my surprise. But wait, there's more. Some of the people Adler interviewed combined the craft with polytheism and identified themselves as pagan. They believed in nature, they personified it with their gods and goddesses, they valued their connection to and place within nature and utilized its bounty to focus their own inner energies on personal goals. Pagan. Witch. My gods, I was home. And when I discussed my findings with my family, no one batted an eye. Still, I needed more. I had the name for my beliefs and practices, but I needed community. I reached out to some local pagans listed in one of the appendices in Drawing Down the Moon, but I really didn't connect with them on the level I was hoping to, so I moved on. In 1991, with a little help from my sister and an archaic work called The Phone Book, I found this place, this very building right here. On my first visit here, I saw a flyer promoting a discussion being given by the well-known pagan author Starhawk. Now I knew I was really in the right place. In 1993, I became a vegetarian, even though nothing on my path, neither paganism nor Unitarian Universalism, required me to give up eating meat. It was my own religious vow to do less harm. Neither does my path ask me to give up anything I feel connected to, such as my candles, my tarot cards, or my stones and crystals, nor am I required to have them. And while I felt welcome here, it took a while to build pagan community. That would come in 1995, when then church member Nancy Machen and I decided to start providing pagan services called Sabbats, or Sabbats if you prefer, to celebrate the pagan liturgical calendar known as the Wheel of the Year. From that point, I began to blossom. Through ritual and devotion, I deepened my connection with nature. I began to recycle more regularly. I learned all the nuts and bolts, and I applied all the bells and smells of being pagan. I met other pagans, including a man who joined this church in 1996, and in 2004 would become my husband. Over the years, I was part of a coven or two, or three. I made many pagan friends, some of whom are still my friends today. Margot Adler's book changed my life, without changing anything at all, really. And as Adler herself was both pagan and Unitarian Universalist, at our General Assembly in Indianapolis in 1996, I was lucky enough to be able to tell her that in person. Nothing about paganism conflicts with Unitarian Universalism. In fact, it is from the pagan UU contingent that we get our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. It is from that same group that we get our sixth source, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Nothing on this path required me to deny what I knew from scientific discovery. It is through paganism that I came to believe that we do not die because of a deed that offended a deity long, long ago by people from whom we may or may not be descended. No, through science, rational thinking, and the pagan worldview that we are a part of nature, not apart from it, did I now understand that we die because we are organic. Like the oak, the raven, the cicada, and the dolphin, we are biodegradable, and we have a relatively predictable lifespan. The earth from which we came will receive us again in our time and recycle the remaining elements into something new. In one of my favorite pictures that serves to connect us as kindred to nature, you see what looks like a pair of lungs. Is it up there on the screen? Yes. Okay. Well, it is, and it isn't. On one side, it is a human lung, but on the other side, it is the branches of a tree. In detail, it shows the trachea branching off into two sides and further breaks down each species' increasingly smaller structures that break down the gases that each of us needs to live. While it is just a coincidence that human lungs and the branches of a tree look alike, the image illustrates how both humans and trees maximize surface area to convert, for us, oxygen into carbon, and for a tree, carbon into oxygen. This is a symbol of the interdependent web of which we are all a part. Speaking of trees, remember I said I used to read to my favorite tree? My sister has an old, very large oak tree on her property that she often talks to. I've always told her that the tree loves her for that. During its spreading, it grew a very heavy branch that went down to the ground and grew back up to head skyward, and it kind of looked like the letter V. The branch was quite lovely. It was embellished with many, many bright green leaves. My sister placed a picnic table behind that branch, and when she and her husband wanted to enjoy the outdoors, they would take their coffee and sit at the picnic table. Sometimes they would watch door-to-door salespeople come up to the door and knock, knock again, only to be disappointed by not getting an answer and then turn around and leave. For this shelter and protection, she always thanked the tree. I reminded her, this tree loves you. It gave you this lovely hiding place. In 1995, my sister and I went to Phoenix to visit our very magical grandmother, while my brother-in-law stayed home to watch their dogs. A strong storm blew through on our way to the airport, and we were a bit apprehensive about flying at that time, but the storm was short-lived and calm skies were forecast for the rest of the day. When my sister called her husband to check in once we had landed and were settled, he had to break the news to her that the storm had taken out her beloved ranch. My sister was heartbroken and cried. When we got home, she mourned and apologized to the tree for not being able to prevent the trauma. Today, my sister still has a picnic table under the same tree, behind a new branch, growing near where the old branch fell off. And the new branch is in relatively the same shape, allowing her to once again hide from salespeople. And again, I remind her, see, I told you this tree loves you. It gave you a second lovely hiding place. Almost 3 years ago, my husband and I bought a new house, exactly 1 mile away from our previous house. We went from living in a newer bi-level with a privacy-fenced yard in a sterile, well-manicured subdivision to living in a less manicured neighborhood in an older ranch home, backed up to just a few houses and a large and delightful, wildly wooded and weedy piece of property. Half a mile from that is a designated bird sanctuary, where every year a few hundred sandhill cranes rest on their journey in the spring and fall. At the new house, many new species have come to my bird feeders, and an occasional owl can be heard at night. Squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, opossum, and deer visit our yard without a fence. And we currently have a den of baby rabbits in our front yard. Neighbors report sightings of fox and coyote, which I have yet to see, but I can hear them when the windows are open and the breeze is right. Through the next door neighbor's yard, and just behind it, is a clearing in the wood where, is it up there? Before we moved there, other neighbors arranged a semicircle of tree trunk segments. My husband and I call that the council headquarters, and await for our invitation to the secret meetings, which we're sure must be on the full moons. Here in this new, less cultivated place is my heart, my pagan heart. This house affords me a bit of each of the 4 sacred pagan elements of earth, air, fire, and water within its walls. From its stone fireplace to its windows that open on all 4 sides of the house to let the air flow freely throughout, to its wall of windows gifting me with a shaded yet gently sunny southern exposure, and its natural backyard swimming pool that fills up whenever there are heavy rains. I am inspired to contemplate the outdoors, even when the weather dictates that I stay inside. It is my theory that whoever built this house in that place in 1954, and I wasn't born until 1962, knew that I would come along in 2019 and fall in love with it. So now, maybe because of this new house and surrounding property, my path is evolving again, just a bit. I want to go even deeper, beyond mere understanding my path. I want to grok it, if you will. My focus has turned towards spiritually internalizing the amazing natural world around me. As was told to me by Ilsa on a Facebook page I consulted for this sermon, Druidry is understanding context and a deeper connection, whereas witchcraft is practical creative power. So yes, I'm now identifying as a Druid. It's just a more specific name for where I am on my journey, like using the word Methodist when describing one's Christianity, or defining oneself as specifically a Zen Buddhist or a pagan Unitarian Universalist. Now I am a Druidic pagan Unitarian Universalist. I'm still that inveterate polytheist, and I am a part of nature, not apart from it. I am in the right place to explore my spiritual path, no matter where it leads, and that is in my home and in my church. And as then church member Nancy Machen said many years ago, with Unitarian Universalism, you can change religions without having to change churches. And I would emphasize, even if your church is nature. Thank you. And now we take the offering. Would someone like to come up and take our offering? Do we have? They're over here. Are we taking 2 still? Okay. The wicker baskets are for paper money, which goes directly to this church. And the cups are for loose change for social change, with which we share, I believe it's half of the money collected in the coins, we share with other organizations outside the walls of this church. Meals on Wheels is this month's recipient. What is freely given is gratefully received. Thank you for your contributions. And now would you join me, please, in the closing hymn, number 1064, in your teal hymnal, Blue Boat Home. You may rise as you are willing and able in body and spirit.
the stream of life. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day, runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that is rocked within the ocean cradle of birth and death, in ebb and in flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride is from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment.
both freshens and fills. Oh, sister, water, you cleanse and flow through rivers and streams in ice and snow. With all of your dancing and colored light, oh, sister earth, you feed all things, the birds and creatures, or scales and wings. Oh, sister death, you meet us here and shake us to one God so near. Oh, God of life, we give you praise for all of your creatures and all of your ways. God of life, we give you praise for all of your creatures and all of your ways. Oh, brother, son.
And now, will you join with me as we extinguish the chalice? The words are printed there on the cards. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be.